Hi, I want to welcome everybody to Worldwide Demonstration. This is India, one of our wonderful participants that's been uniting with us all around the world. And the best way to get the information about what's happening in India is to talk to those in India. So please welcome, I have Rushil Dia,
Divya.
Divya, and Johan. And we're going to start with ladies first. Okay, so Divya, would you like to just share where you are in India and a little bit about how you were brought into the standing for our rights and freedoms?
Okay, thank you. Thanks for having us here. Thanks for giving us this opportunity to talk about what goes on in India, because I think the first world perspective of India is very different, very colored by the mainstream media of your countries compared to what is the ground reality. In fact, even the urban middle class perspective of India would be different from what we really experience on the streets of India. So my name is Divya, and I live in a city called Pune, uh, which has quite a huge population. I forget what the number is, but I've been off all kinds of allopathic medicines for more than 20 years. Soon after my children were born, uh, a few years after that, all three of us stopped taking any kind of allopathic medicine. I also pulled them out of school, and we've homeschooled. We've done a lot of voluntary work in forests and fields, and basically just connected with nature and grown. So that's where I was coming from. That's where my children, that's how I raised them. And there's been a hearty skepticism of how the pharmaceutical industry and the entire medical allopathic, what kind of I didn't call it tyranny until 2020, but it was already getting there. So there's been an observation of that for 2 decades now, and an understanding. So it was well before March 2020 that I started to have discussions with my son that something's going on. I don't know, and I can't put my finger on it, but I can see that there's something coming. I never thought it would be so bad. And of course, I started to be very vocal about it. And I was very alone in the beginning. When I was saying this, there was complete opposition from absolutely everybody. I couldn't find anyone I had a small handful of friends who were also not into allopathy and living a closer to nature life for a long time. But it was very tough. And then I sort of discovered Johan and a couple of other vocal, outspoken people on Facebook just through discussions and friends. And then that's how we connected with a larger group of people across India who have been vocalizing and trying to awaken others to what's going on.
So I'm so connected just with what you shared because, allopathic medicine, for those that are going, what the heck? That's the first time they've heard that word. Who wants to, you want to describe what allopathic is, because it's just big pharma, right? It's everything in Western medicine that is allopathic. And
right.
So
it's the default across the world. I think in India we've been lucky that we're still a little connected with the kitchen being the source of health and well-being. So I would give I had a book called A Nature Cure, which basically just told me how to use ginger and pepper and stuff like that to cure most of the illnesses that my kids would get. And in India, we're lucky that we have so many holistic health traditional wisdom, which still percolates through the population. To almost everybody has been exposed to naturopathy, yoga, Ayurveda. There's so many of these systems that are there. There's just people who know what kind of wild edibles can cure you, give you. So we're a little bit more connected to that. And but it's been, it's now so deviant. It's called alternate medicine, where when allopathy becomes the mainstream and the default. I call them defaults, that you don't even think when you turn to a medical practitioner for some pill or the other. You don't even think about it.
Yeah, and this is one of the advantages right now that we're communicating, because, you know, I first started off the allopathic journey in 1991. And so my children too were raised, you know, completely sort of off the system. So it's like us that are mothers just doing our own thing of what we thought was best are now finding each other, and fathers and brothers and sisters. And that's really what the worldwide rally movement is mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and grandfathers that have this inner wisdom or inner calling, inner something that says, right?
Yeah.
So, this is, and when you said you're not sure population, just again to give perspective here, are we talking maybe over 10 million people, over 5 million, 20 million, you know, like?
Pune. I'm just going to Google it right away. I can do that while I still talk about.
You Google on that, because that's again the idea. Some people think big is, wow, big is, I'm on an island right now with 150,000 people, right? Yet it's like its own little country, and it's unbelievable. So how far, Rochelle, are you from Divya?
So I would say about 600, 700 kilometers. All three of us are from the west coast of India. So in that sense, it's 1 hour flight or 10 hours, 12 hours car journey maybe. Between Mumbai and Pune, Mumbai is where Johan's from. I think it's a closer drive, maybe 3-4 hours. But yeah, we're all from the western part of the country. We still have people all the way on the east, the north, the south. We are spread out quite far and wide.
And what made you get involved in standing for your rights and freedoms and educating others about what truly we were all given at birth?
Well, much like Divya, I too started my journey not as long back as her, but about 8 years ago, when I discovered the alternative medicine or holistic healing or whatever you may want to call it. But that's when I discovered it, and that was my first step into the world of alternatives. And it's not just medicine, but alternative views to every single thing in life. You know, there is an alternative view, which obviously the mainstream doesn't cover. And so I started my journey maybe 8 years ago. And from the very first day, obviously I realized there's something fishy. And much like most of us in India, you know, the credit does to a large extent go to Johan, you know, for connecting all of us, you know, all across India. And I guess it's through him and his venture. I guess he'll talk more about it, but that's where we kind of connected with each other, and we started this movement, which we call Awaken India Movement. And now it's a growing movement, and it was Awaken India Movement which conducted about 12 rallies on the 24th of July, which happened all across the country. And I think it was a great success, thanks to also in part to worldwide demonstrations, you know, for showing us the way of how to organize these rallies. But you know, this movement, Awaken India Movement, has doctors, has lawyers, has business people. I myself come from a business background, and I've never been into politics. I've never been into activism or health. But just that what's happening right now, in terms of, you know, our rights being taken away. I mean, the most basic fundamental rights that, you know, you can think of: right to livelihood, right to personal choice, right to personal liberties. I mean, they're all completely out of the window. And so very early on, I realized that, you know, we must take a stand now. And if we don't, then I don't see a very bright future for humanity. So that's where I come from.
Yeah. And that is so right on, right? It's like our rights and freedoms, I almost feel like people have taken for granted, you know, over this time, because life has been comfortable. And now it's like, oh my gosh, you just told us that we're locked up. You've told me I don't have the right to go to work. You told me I can't speak what my feelings are about alternatives. And then those of us that have never had that experience, they're still going, what are you talking about? You're being censored. I'm never censored because they're just doing the same thing that they've always been doing. So this is wonderful. Johan, so you're the seed that blossomed into Awakening India, that the branches are all growing all across your great country.
Your mic.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, I was saying I wouldn't take so much credit on myself, although I'll describe a little bit of my journey and then, share how we already connected and how Awaken India movement really came to be. So my personal journey started nearly 6 years ago now, when I really, was in college and pursuing my traditional academic career in finance, and the penny dropped because I ran into some personal issues in my own personal relationship life, which made me really question bigger things in life. That's when I wanted to know more about spirituality and what happens after death and the nature of the soul and all that. So that was my entry point into all of this. I didn't come into this through health or through 9/11 as many people do usually, but I came into it through a spiritual crisis or a spiritual quest, and that's what really opened me up to want to know the truth in all areas, because it was a quest for truth and spirituality. So that cut through into the physical domain and the world we are living in, and that's when I really started consuming a lot of conspiracy material. So that was a long time ago, and most of the journey was filled with ridicule, because I mean, ever since I understood the impact of the information, I wanted to put it out to people. And for most of the time, it was friends dropping out, losing support from people and support systems falling off, the whole life kind of transitioning into it. And I'm glad I faced it early on, because I see a lot of people facing it now, and they're going through a crisis because they're going through a crisis in their personal life as well as a crisis in the exterior world. So it's too much to take for people, but I kind of had an early head start, and a lot of us on this panel did. So that's what keeps us in a position, I think, to be more level-headed and to kind of take things as they come. But I got finally the confidence to really start putting my message out. I mean, I was already doing it for years through Facebook and through my own personal social media handles and all of that, and trying to connect the Indian picture to the global politics that's taking place. But 2 years back, I really got the confidence to start my YouTube channel. So that's when I started making content to really help Indians to understand how the globalist tentacles are really working in India, and like how the Indian context really fits into the larger picture. That's been kind of what my passion has been all this while. And I'm also involved in the health space. So I'm a functional medicine practitioner. I work to reverse chronic health diseases naturally in people, and we specialize in diagnostics mainly. So that's been my journey. I mean, ever since I started my YouTube channel, I always wanted to connect people. So I always was taking initiatives to get people into Telegram groups, and forming city-wise groups and area-wise groups. So we had a great community in Mumbai that started out nearly 2 years back, ever since the pandemic began. And a couple of us have been working very closely since then. So we all connected in Mumbai, and we have a very great community out here. It's grown massively now, but even when we started, we had nearly, I think our first meeting was like 20 people meeting, violating the lockdown. And this was right in the beginning when everyone was paranoid, and people saw you going out, they saw you as a murderer or something like that. So that's when we all met and really started that. And we organized some protests in Mumbai. We've had public events since the last 1.5 2 years. And finally, we wanted to take this initiative to a national level. So a couple of us in Mumbai, along with a couple of passionate people we connected with all over India, like Ushil, like Divya, and many others like them, we wanted to really come under one banner, because I was doing my own personal thing to Anarchy for Freedom. That's my own personal project. But we all wanted to come under a larger banner that encompasses all of us, and we can all kind of stand together and do something that represents all of us. So that's what led to the creation of Awaken India movement. And I mean, it's been a pleasure working with everyone, and I'm personally very happy to see this come to where it has today, because we started out with barely nothing just a couple of months back, and here we are like organizing a very, very big protest. Like, we've never had a protest culture, at least surrounding issues like these in India. And in that kind of context, to be able to pull off a rally which has 500 people or something, it's a big achievement for us, at least in Mumbai out here. So that's what we had at the last rally. We've always seen like 50, 80 people show up in all the protests we had, but this time like a really large number of people came up. So that was a big confidence boost for all of us as well out here, that there are people kind of coming together. And even apart from the protest side of things, we have a lot of legal battles going on. We have things going on in many different areas, the content front, the education front. So everything's shaping together well. I just think that we need to keep pushing more and more, and this is going to grow up to be something really massive in our country, for sure.
Yeah, and I can feel the energy and enthusiasm from the three of you in this. It's like you're all uniting in your country, and as every country is uniting and finding, I'm not the only person. Oh, I get rid of that word now that I know the legal connotation of person. I'm not the only living woman or living man that feels that way. It's wonderful uniting with each other, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Oh,
yeah. So I like the you know, the feel good vibes, etc. You know, however, I know that there's some questions that have been in the media or things that have been portrayed that I'd really like you guys to address. So one of them was that people were just dying in the streets everywhere in India, and the one picture, you know, I saw was, someone else said it's the same picture they used when they had a gas explosion. Someone else was saying people actually sleep in the streets in you know, different places in India, so they could have been asleep. What was really going on?
Roshan, go ahead.
Yeah, so I mean, as you rightly pointed out, there were images which were probably from a different problem. I guess one of them was about the gas leak. Things are obviously blown out of proportion. India being affected was a big part of their propaganda. There are, you know, they really had a plan behind, you know, making India the kind of scapegoat, because then the Delta variant couldn't have come out without India being so badly affected, right? So you know, there was definitely a deliberate attempt to, you know, show India in a bad light. Definitely, there were, you know, some deaths we've all experienced in our families and friends, but the reason for the deaths are wide-ranging. You know, it's not just COVID, as they call it. We started our vaccination program back in January. That had a big role to play. Obviously, the treatment protocols that they've been following. You know, for common cold and cough, if you start prescribing steroids and experimental drugs, God knows what's going to happen to your body. So, I mean, there are a whole host of issues which caused the so-called second wave, which wasn't as bad as portrayed in international media, especially. And, you know, we really didn't see people dying on the streets or being breathless on the streets and whatnot. People still lived, you know, in slums, in small kind of, you know, living environments. And you know, they're fine, absolutely, you know, zero problems. In fact, you know, I can even mention the farmers' protests. There are at least 100,000 to 200,000 farmers sitting on the borders of New Delhi, which is the capital of India. And they've never socially distanced. They've never worn a mask. They've never tested themselves, and they're fine. There's not a single COVID death in, you know, so many people being together. So yeah, you know, to sum it up, it was blown out of proportion, deliberately done. And especially in the international media, it was basically to scare people that what's coming is going to be really bad. That's my take on it. If
anyone want to add to that?
So
Yeah, I'd just like to add some mismanagement issues along with that as well. So what happened is, you know, because of the faulty diagnostics that we have, I mean, like, you know, the entire fear psychosis had become so much, and they had ramped it up to such an extent that people were being suggested just with positive cases and mild symptoms to go get admitted in the hospital. And, you know, a lot of people were really trying to cut the symptoms from the beginning, because they've been told that, if, you know, you need to act as soon as something starts, or if your oximeter levels drop or something. So that led to a huge load on the hospitals. And because they have limited number of you know, wards or beds allocated for COVID positive, and they have, like, you know, a small number otherwise, you know, I had my own friends who work in hospitals, or, you know, who have connections with big hospital chains in the metropolitan cities, telling me that a lot of the beds for other causes were going empty, and a lot of people were like being cramped into that COVID category. And because of that, the people who actually needed beds weren't getting them. So it is our experience, like, especially in my own, I mean, Mumbai circle, I had people from our own circle of vacant people calling me and telling me that we need a bed for our, you know, family member or something, but we're not getting one. So the crisis was real. There really was a shortage in beds, but it was caused largely due to a mismanagement and not an actual, you know, surge of coronavirus cases or something. And as Rushil said, the vaccination rollout did have a big role to play in the, you know, adverse events that were taking place that time.
Yeah, I believe, and correct me if I'm mistaken, that you have had doctors, the doctors of India come together and said that there needs to be, you know, the evidence needs to be looked at. The adverse reactions to the vaccines are disproportional to anything else that's ever been on a vaccine. So it's a common story that I find in country to country. In Canada, for instance, when I looked up the COVID deaths in our you know, under our Canadian Health Act, it says any by World Health Organization directive, any death where they've had a PCR test essentially that says they had COVID, and then they die of a heart attack or they die of something, it's a comorbidity, but COVID is on the death certificate. Is that the same with you guys?
Exactly.
Yeah.
The same.
And the whole idea of they've played this narrative so well. So the whole idea of considering an asymptomatic person to be ill and to be a potential carrier of this, this invisible, undescribable, undefinable, until they define it however they want. But an asymptomatic person, so when you convince people that you could be asymptomatically really sick, and you could asymptomatically really make somebody else sick, the fear psychosis is insane. So there was mainstream media articles at the start of the second wave. There was one from Bangalore which said that 95% of the patients in a hospital were asymptomatic. So I'm like, why are they even there then? If they're asymptomatic, stay at home and have some ginger or whatever. So and I think that it was largely the urban middle class that was caught up in this narrative, and they still are. It's always been that way because they are completely cut off. Like within India, you have so many worlds. This is something that I've experienced, that you have a world that lives in the high-rise apartments in middle-class urban India, who have they might be interacting with the poor urban and the poor rural, but they dismiss them. They don't have a concept of their lives. So they don't have they don't even have an idea that there may be a congested slum area of really poor people living back to back with each other. That social distancing, sanitization, masking, it's impossible. Mm-hmm. And this has been the situation through the summer of 2020. And I would walk around, and I walked through the poorer neighborhoods, and I could see people, they were not caught up in this narrative at all. No mask, no nothing, no social distancing. And after that, till March of 2021, after we started the opening up of the lockdown process, which was a painful, torturous, months-long process, between November and March of 21, for those 5 months, most of the people in rural India and the poor, backwaters of the Indian urban cities, people were just going about doing things like normal. It was crowded, sweaty. People were sweating and urinating on the streets like they normally did, and everybody was there. It's the vaccine rolls out in the end of Jan on Feb, and then suddenly you have something, start up. So it's like, just connect the dots and you'll get the picture. Yeah.
It is very, it really has been a divide and conquer strategy that has been portrayed. And I feel those that have just chosen to not get the vaccine, the injection and the jab, the so-called 20 to 30% that immediately just sort of said no, if their numbers are correct, are the ones that have already taken their health in personal responsibility. They are already aware of their body. They are aware that asymptomatic means you're healthy.
Essentially.
Right? Yeah. And that's kind of when I always like to look at is, how can this be working for us? How can it be awakening us? How is it awakening India? It's to really get the play on the words and the narrative, and how easily this globalists want to shift us into fear. And fear is the coercion, the manipulation, the terrorizing, and then they just follow along with their abuser, right? Yeah. They just, okay. And if someone said to me last night, they said, well, did you ask, what did your master say when you said no? And they said, well, like, I never asked. Like, people are just getting the vaccine. Oh, I think I have to get it. I've got to get it to travel. Yeah. I've got to get it to go to work. well, what did your master say when you said no? Like, people aren't even having that experience of saying no and then dealing with the consequence.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. We in fact, we just had a meeting yesterday of the Awaken India group, and I think this was what we all felt, that most of the people around us they're just taking it without thinking, without even saying that first, like, no, I'm gonna wait. Nothing. Not even I'll wait a bit and see. So that's the first barrier to get
I
people to.
think it's kind of important for us not to get discouraged, thinking that if people are taking the vaccine, they're lost or they'll never be a part of us. Because I've seen a lot of people who are taking the vaccine and then realizing the issue and then coming on our side. So, you're going to see a lot of vaccine awakening happen as well when these people themselves start to face adverse events. But I mean, some people are never going to get it. Like, I mean, we've come across cases where heart attacks have happened in the family a couple of hours after getting the vaccine and they still don't make the connection because they've been so brainwashed into believing that the vaccine is so safe and effective, and it's like, blessing from the gods, so it can never be wrong. That's what
I
they
know.
believe.
And that's a great point. It is, because I do feel that things are going to get, almost from those of us that are comprehending what's going on, have an understanding. It's going to seem to get crazier or more insane because, the veils of deception need to be revealed. And, it's, to me, it's mind boggling that somebody who goes, well, I don't feel anything, but I better go get tested. And then the test says I'm positive, so I better go to the hospital, right? And then, that's all normal to them now. Yet, as you just said, someone has the vaccine, they die of a heart attack, and they go, oh, I guess it was just their time. They had a heart attack.
Right.
So, I just want to add something here. One of the issues Awaken India movement has taken up is we don't want the new normal, right? And so that's also part of the awakening process, to not accept the new normal, the normal that they want us to kind of believe and accept. And so that also requires a level of education that, so that people can understand what is really normal and what is the new normal, or what was the old normal for that matter. And that's also going to be part of the journey we take people through in India.
So what is your vision for an awakened India?
That's a broad question. Well, I don't know. Johan, you want to say about this?
I think it really boils down to people understanding rights. Like we might be taking up topical issues like the vaccine mandates or the 5G rollout, or the increasing privatization and selling off of our resources to the people involved in the Great Reset agenda and stuff. So I think ultimately the awakening is going to come when people understand that they're sovereign beings and that we all have a right to our bodies and our properties, and that no government, no so-called authority figure can just come squash a pen and say that I declare that from now on your rights are totally dismissed because of this phony pandemic that we made up. So once people get that, that understanding itself will solve a lot of the problems in all these aspects we're facing, because they're really rooting from a lack of understanding of self-ownership. And most Indians really have this mindset where they see the government as their parents. Like, it's a very kind of maternal kind of relationship where they really see the state as something that wants to take care of them and nurture them and will protect them from the bad guys and stuff. So I think there will be a growing up in a literal sense of the people where they shift their mindset that we typically have as children. So a lot of these people are children walking in adult bodies because they don't have an understanding of what it really means to have the maturity to be an adult and to take responsibility for their own life. So once we start to see that happen, we'll really see the shift. And I think all our efforts are kind of geared towards not just waking up people towards this aspect of the vaccine. And of course, that's, the urgent issues that are, of course, of more importance. But we have a very broad, holistic vision where we want to really get to the root cause of the problem itself and not just keep fighting these issues. So I think collectively what we're facing even globally right now is kind of what we face in our own personal lives when we have subconscious mind patterns and keep coming across the same kind of people again and again. So what we're facing on a global scale is that we're not really learning the things that we need to take our freedoms back and maintain them. So we're facing the continual erosion of our rights and liberties, and that's going to keep going on, and the race is going to be tortured until, you know, either we finally get to the place where we learn what we need to and fix it, or we'll perish. I mean, that's what nature will do to us.
Yeah, and one of those is also your farming rights, right? Like, you know, as you say, land and resources. I mean, India is, as you said, was it 2,000 farmers that were, you know, standing up for the globalists, really? 2,000.
100,000.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. So do you want to say a little bit about that, of how that's all related? Because it is all related, right?
Yeah.
So
actually, I just wanted to add a little bit to the previous question, and maybe it can flow into this one with that. I was interviewed some time back on a podcast about what my vision for India would be in another 25 years. That's 100 years of freedom from the British independence. But I think that one of the things that I've always felt is that India has it's very hard to pin down when you talk about this country, you talk about this land. We have an immense diversity of absolutely everything, from language to food to biodiversity. And the thing is that, you know, we, the three of us here, and a large part of our groups are very, very urban, brought up. We've lived in cities all our life. Our connection with the land, with the people of this land is, you know, unless we consciously go back to it, we have been educated away from it. Our education system has ensured that we continue to be colonized and indoctrinated in the way that we were meant to. The education system here is completely, it pulls you right away from this country. We speak in English, and you know, that becomes the sort of aspirational thing. We lose our languages, but all the same, it's a huge country with so many people who are still tied in to the, you know, rich wisdom and tradition that we have. And we put ourselves down. That's a part of the fallout of having been colonized. And I would actually look back and say that the colonization never ended. It's always been there. It just appeared to be Indian people in the front of it, but the colonization never ended. And so we have a tendency we don't even begin to understand what we have, the power of what we have, the richness of what we have. And my vision is for us to be able to actually pull back on the native intelligence that I think that the people of this country subconsciously carry. We don't even know that we have it, but I feel that it's there. I had a moment of epiphany a few weeks back when I watched fireflies on a hillside, and it was an amazing moment, because we were standing in front of this one tree, and the fireflies lit up in waves, and the wave went from this one tree down into the hillside, and it repeated. And I'm standing there watching this and thinking, they don't communicate, they have no words. These are tiny little insects which we wouldn't even recognize their intelligence, but something is guiding this coordination, this thing. And it's almost as though that, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of fireflies there were, there is some life that is flowing through all of them. And I think that that's something that we have to remember about humanity as a whole, that we're far more than these individual people right now that we, you know, talking and coming under this. There is this living subconscious. I think there's a word for it in the Hindu, this thing called Brahman, which encompasses all of us. And I think that in this land the people of this land and that subconscious has a lot of solutions to offer to the world on how to be able to live on this planet. We Indians need to start to appreciate that, go back to that, and then be able to offer it to the rest of the world, because I think that we have solutions for so many things. So even with the farming, I've been an urban farmer for 20 years. I've been doing permaculture, regenerative farming, and in fact, I'm in the process now of moving right out onto the land to start farming, basically. And the thing is that the Green Revolution was such a big hoax. India has how much are we now? 1.5 billion, 1.7 billion people?
1.3, right? Somewhere 1.3,
1.4 billion people on this tiny subcontinent. The crush of humanity, the density of this population is immense. It's unbelievable. I think it's 1/7 of the world's population is on this subcontinent. And we have fed ourselves through subsistence farming, through regenerative, very, very connected farming for thousands of years. And so everything that's coming in, that came in with the Green Revolution, the Green Revolution, that word is just so offensive to use it for, to actually subvert our practices, to remove traditional farming, to degenerate our soil with fertilizers and with all the chemicals, with the seed. And it's that's what the farmers, I mean, I don't think every farmer in the farmers' protest is even aware of all these issues, but there's a wide network of farmers across this country who are preserving indigenous seeds, who are preserving who are kind of recreating regenerative practices. I just came back from a workshop last weekend where there's this person who has a 5-acre farm, and he's growing 187 different varieties of things in that one thing, with absolutely no input from the outside and minimal human interference as well. So I see all these things, and I think that that's really so hopeful, because these solutions are there, these people are there. We need to tap right back into our native souls and get back on that again. Sorry, I think I took a lot of time on this one.
No, I would just
to
go ahead, Rishabh.
No, sorry, just to give context about the Green Revolution, it happened back in the 60s when India was wheat deficit, and it was the beginning of industrialization of farming in India. That is when we started implementing farming technologies from the West, using hybrid seeds and using fertilizers and modern equipment. And so that was the beginning of industrialization of farming in India. And to go back to your question about the farmers, essentially that's exactly what they're fighting: the corporatization of farming in India. So we can go into the details of the bills that they're protesting, but essentially this is what they don't want: a corporate takeover of, starting with the farmlands, but then percolating through every other industry as well. So just wanted
they
to
have a kind of knack for what they've seen happen in the West also, because the same patterns kind of already played out in America and in UK, where small farmers were like really wiped out, and they were replaced by these large factory farms and these type of operations where big corporations like Monsanto and large agrochemical giants are really running them and then giving contracts. So they don't want things to go in that direction. So yeah, I mean, although they might not intellectually fully grasp everything, but as connected to the soil and to the earth, they're very street smart with where things are going.
Well, I feel like when you brought up the corporations, it's a good time to say that this is kind of like the corporations have all organized themselves. As we know, the richest have gotten richer, 45%, trillions of dollars. And then over on this side is the living, breathing men and women that are being organized in a sense by the spirit, by Brahma, by presence. So it's what each of us is receiving, and then we're trusting, and then we meet up with each other. And that, I feel, if we can trust that presence that's never, always there, what we've forgotten about because we've been trained over here, then we have the advantage. because this is where the source comes from. This is where we're all remembering now, as you said, subconsciously or just intuitively, that we are honoring the planet that we're on. We're working together and synergistically. We want to love and respect each other. The idea of a caste system, or, you know, it all goes away, right? We don't want to do harm. So my new things these days are law versus legal. So we've been in this legal world full of paper, and the law is love always wins on land, air, and water. And each of us, we're on the land, we breathe the air, and we're made of water. So this is where we come into our sovereignty, and we give permission for everybody else to do the same. And Worldwide Rally has 5 freedoms, or worldwide demonstration. And I'd love to hear it spoken in your language or dialect. So one is the freedom of speech. So
that would be bolne ki azadi.
बोलने की आजादी, स्वतंत्रता.
Okay, freedom of choice.
My Hindi is not that good.
Chunne ki azadi.
चुनने की आजादी. I mean, these are
Closest.
Yeah.
It's not. Yeah.
closest.
Okay, freedom of assembly.
इकट्ठा होने की आजादी.
संगठित होने की आजादी.
Freedom of health.
स्वास्थ्य की आजादी.
And freedom of movement.
घूमने की आजादी.
Yeah. So that's a great example when you go, how well you've been trained in the colonial system to speak English, right?
Yeah.
We're very bad at bad examples of how well Indians speak Hindi. So people or the audience do not judge us for that, please. Thank you.
But my point being that people automatically, like, stereotypes are so present for everybody. And that's why I think it's so easy for them to get hypnotized with what's going on, right? You know, there's sort of essentially kind of like 5 mini countries in the country that's labeled India, in the land known as India. How many different dialects are present?
I speak, my mother tongue is Marathi, and just this mother tongue of mine, the dialect changes every almost 50 kilometers. So if I'm 300 kilometers from home, I have to struggle to understand my own language, my own mother tongue.
So even the fact that English has become the language that's accepted in so many ways around the world has been part of this wanting to control. We want to unify. They want to control and make it fit into their box.
Yeah.
And we're moving to this sense of respecting and loving each other's uniqueness, because that's what we all are, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I also heard that your legal teams have served one of the scientists at the World Health Organization, that she never revealed that ivermectin could be helpful. Is that a true story?
Yes, that is.
Yeah. In fact, Johan, if you could just give a brief of what Indian Bar Association is doing and just some of the legal cases taken up, I think that would be good to hear for the audience, the international audience.
Yeah, so we at Awaken India Movement were really glad to connect with Nilesh and Dipali Ojha. We got to know of them after they really took up the ivermectin matter. So before that, we were not in direct connection with them. And I mean, it is kind of an interesting story because, one of our team members and I were in Delhi working on the matter for another Supreme Court case that, we filed. But we got to know that there are these lawyers back in our city who've kind of taken this action against WHO and Swami Swaminathan and sent legal notices, and it was like really trending all over the world. So we got interested and we were like, okay, let's get something going with them. So we had a meeting arranged, and it was fantastic connecting with these people because they literally live like 10 minutes away from where I live. So, it was a pleasure really knowing that there are such firebrand, active, warrior type lawyers with such a stature and, with so much accomplished behind them in terms of their legal careers, who are really wanting to do something about this global crisis that we're faced with. So that's how we tended to connect with them on the ivermectin issue. It's true that they did serve legal notices to Swami Swaminathan and WHO. They've written an in-depth letter to us government and filed an official complaint to get CBI, that's our premier like investigative agency, get an inquiry going on all the accused. So that involves people like Gates and Fauci and a couple of other people, Tedros and Swami Swaminathan, and some of our local billionaires and health people involved in controlling the health policy out here and things like that. So they've really prepared a great in-depth evidence-based document going into all the different facets of the pandemic, and even some past scandals that have taken place in our country, like Gates really coming in, and the entire HPV vaccine scandal that took place in 2009. So there's a lot of history behind all these things. They took up all these pertinent issues in their complaint, and they're now waiting for the state to take some kind of action. If they don't take it in a stipulated time period, then they'll be filing a writ in the court, basically going after the government to take action against them. So that's the update as far as that goes. Other than that, we are currently working with them to quash a circular that came out in our own state, which basically talks about allowing people who've taken the vaccine to travel, to take the local trains out here, which is Mumbai's lifeline really. Like most of the people in our city really depend on the local trains, which have been shut down for the most part of this pandemic. They're open for really select number of people. So it's very, very difficult because people out here aren't that rich, so a lot of them really depend on the local public transport, and that lifeline's really been cut out. So a lot of people aren't able to go to their jobs and things like that, and now they're bringing in this vaccine coercion. So we are working on that to really quash that order. And then other than that, we've prepared some legal documents for people. So we've got a document just released yesterday by them. We've been working with them a lot of these issues. So they prepared a document for claiming compensation for the lockdown measures. So the lockdowns that have devastated people's businesses and personal lives and livelihoods, and also they've prepared a document where people can go and claim compensation, because there are compensation clauses in the acts that these people are using to usher in the lockdown. So they've prepared a document for that, as well as a document for people who've taken the vaccine and then they came to know that they've been cheated or that they weren't told about all the adverse effects. So whether someone has actually had an adverse effect or whether someone just taken the vaccine, they can go and literally sue the doctor who gave them the vaccine, as well as some other people involved in perpetuating this whole myth that the vaccine is safe and effective. So on the legal front, at least with these lawyers, this is what we've been up to, and that's the latest update. They've gone after some multinational companies also out here that have really forced their employees to take vaccines, so they're going to do a case against them soon. And other than these lawyers, we're also connected with two other big Supreme Court senior advocates like Colin Gonsalves and Prashant Bhushan. These are really big names in the country who've been involved actively, and they're big public figures as well. So they are also working on two petitions that are right now waiting to be filed in the Supreme Court. We just got great news today that one of them is going to be listed on Monday. And they've also filed many cases in the high courts of the Northeast in the country, and we've got many victories over there. So we've already got like 5 high courts in the Northeast ruling that you can't mandate vaccines for opening a shop or for travel and things like that.
So you have
yeah.
5 high courts that have already ruled no to mandatory vaccines for travel, yes, or for going into a business.
Yeah, but they're shameless. They're still doing contempt. So we're going to have to take them up for contempt of court now.
Yeah, but that's huge because they're at least in the court, and the court that's being ruled, because I know in Canada, some of our cases, the courts just shut down. They were just kind of like, sorry. They kept putting off the date and putting off the date. And so, the so-called big cases or just utterly dismissed before they were even heard. So this is brilliant. We need to spread that out. Okay. Because I feel the more we share, right? We share the wins and we're really clear on what's going on. We, the people, will help inspire the other people to notice the discernment within themselves, because that is the sense of everybody has the right to choose. That is freedom. And if they choose to stay in the colonial system, they can stay in the colonial system and that structures and the systems. But if they'd like to live in a different awakened world and the vision that you shared, right, then we can be moving in that direction.
Yeah, absolutely.
September 18th, September 19th is the next, that one weekend we'll all be together. Will you be doing do you know yet? Are you doing a Saturday, a Sunday?
Well, we haven't decided. We have a lot of people who prefer Sundays over Saturdays, so we might go with the Sunday this time. But we'll keep it open, and we'll probably decide towards closer to the date, maybe.
Yep.
And
And
then I'll just add one thing. If possible, we might do it on both the days. So let's.
Yeah, let's be optimistic.
well, one weekend we'll all be together, right? And I mean, it's the sense that honoring the cultures, because we're all different, and honoring the timing, because every country is different. I know in Israel this weekend is between both their holidays, right? So just that if it was any other time it wouldn't work for them. So it's a fine balancing act to trust the process, but in doing so we are all continuing, right? You're still continuing to make headway in all areas. What are your children back at school? Are they on winter vacation? Like it's
summer vacations, but they haven't reopened schools yet.
Not yet.
Okay, and so if they reopen schools, are they saying the kids have to be vaccinated? Have they started vaccinating your under 12 or your 12-year-olds?
Not yet.
No.
Okay.
They're going to probably start testing them soon, they've already started testing them. They might come up with some mandate maybe in a month or so, but we are hopeful that we are able to stop it. We have some strategies that we're working on.
Yes, and we are not going to reveal all your strategies because we have to keep them.
Until they're out. When they're out, you'll.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd like the audience to know about your experience right now that you want to speak out to the world? And please do.
I'd just like to express my gratitude to everyone who's woken up and who has the courage to speak out. And it's wonderful to have connected with people like-minded, and to, my arrival at these realizations was purely through intuition. It was nobody else gave me a single one of the words that I have used to describe. It was my experience and my intuition that led me to this. And more I find that the awakened people with whom I connect, it's through this authenticity that we found our intuition, and our intuition led us to this. So, and to see this happening globally is beautiful. So keep it up.
I'd just like to thank Jacqueline. I'd like to thank you and Sunny and the whole WWT team for one is giving us the courage and showing us the way in some ways, but also really giving us some hope that we can resist these agendas and we can stand together and be united and fight this evil. So that's what I got from being a part of this group, WWT group. So I'm really thankful for that, and I'm thankful to everybody else who's fighting for freedom and truth and justice. So thank you.
Yeah, and I'd like to express my gratitude as well to everything that you guys are doing. And it's really nice. I mean, even when we're doing the protests, just in spirit, through the heart, to be connected to all the people around the world at the same day and the same time, just working towards the same cause of uplifting humanity and overall just getting us out of this mess that we're currently stuck in. So I think that a lot of people right now are really starting to connect with their heart and starting to see that, there's something wrong. And, a lot of people are still consumed in that fear cycle of death and, adverse, consequences for speaking the truth and all. But I feel that as more and more of us are starting to do this, and it's happening, like it's a paradise for me. I started with just a handful of people who I could count on my fingers to really speak with, who would be interested in this information. And for a long time, it was like that. But just seeing the explosion of this whole community and people really wanting to know the truth about all these areas, the interest has just exploded out here. So I just think that it's going to get better and better. And I mean, we might see things getting worse in the external world, but there has to be that kind of decay and some level of breakdown for a new world to emerge. So I think that we're going to land up on a better side after this whole thing goes down.
My favorite expression, for those that work with me know that I always say breakdown leads to breakthrough. And, you know, we're literally going from caterpillar to butterfly. So we were all forced in the chrysalis last March, right? And your caterpillar's breaking down, and it's like the butterfly hasn't quite emerged for yet, you know, and that process still is unfolding. And I'm so grateful for all of you to be here and to share. And I look forward to staying connected heart to heart and being one.
Sure.
Thank you.